I slid my phone across the coffee shop table, the photograph glowing on the screen. Olivia's perfectly manicured fingers froze around her latte cup as she stared at the image, her own handwriting practice sheet, filled with dozens of copies of our grandfather's signature. "What is this?" she stammered, her voice trembling for the first time in years. "My name is Lily Thompson, and up until a few weeks ago, my life was normal. I worked as a librarian, loved my cat Whiskers, and tried to maintain a relationship with my family, despite the growing distance I felt. I'm 28 years old. Then, the will happened. It all started with Grandpa Joe's passing. He wasn't just any grandpa, he was my grandpa. We shared a special bond, built on bedtime stories and secret ice cream trips. When the initial will was read, I wasn't expecting much. Grandpa had always been generous, but I knew my parents weren't exactly swimming in cash, so I figured whatever small inheritance he had would probably go to them. Imagine my surprise, then, when it was announced that my sister, Olivia, was to receive $100,000. $100,000. And me? Nothing. Zero. Zilch. I was hurt, of course. Not just because of the money, but because it felt like a slap in the face. It felt like I was worth less. When I confronted my parents, they mumbled something about Olivia needing it more, about her expensive tastes and how she deserved a little help getting started. It felt like a weak excuse, a justification for something inherently unfair. That's when my life took a turn for the strange, and I found myself smack dab in the middle of a real-life inheritance drama, one I never saw coming. It involved a surprise visit from Grandpa Joe's lawyer, a mysterious new will, and a secret about my sister that I never could have imagined. This wasn't just about money anymore, it was about family, betrayal, and discovering who I really was. Before the lawyer showed up, before I knew anything about forged signatures and secret fortunes, there was just Grandpa Joe. He wasn't just my grandfather, he was my confidant, my partner in crime, the one person who always seemed to see the best in me, even when I struggled to see it myself. I remember spending summers at his house, a sprawling Victorian with a wraparound porch that seemed to stretch on forever. We'd sit there for hours, him telling me stories about his adventures as a young man, tales of faraway lands and daring escapades. They were probably embellished, but I ate them up every time. Grandpa Joe had a twinkle in his eye and a warm smile that could melt glaciers. He always smelled of pipe tobacco and old books, a comforting aroma that instantly put me at ease. He was a successful businessman, having built his company from the ground up. I didn't know the specifics, just that he was involved in real estate and that he'd made a lot of money over the years. Enough money, apparently, to leave behind a rather significant estate. He always encouraged my love of reading, gifting me stacks of books for birthdays and holidays. "Knowledge is power, Lilypad," he'd say, using his silly nickname for me. Never stop learning, never stop questioning. He believed in me, in my potential, in my ability to make a difference in the world. He saw something in me that I wasn't sure I even saw in myself. Our bond was special, different from the one he shared with Olivia. While she enjoyed his lavish gifts and extravagant vacations, I cherished our quiet moments, the times we spent simply talking and connecting. I felt like he truly knew me, the real me, not just the surface-level version. And that's what made the initial will sting so much. It felt like he didn't know me at all. The day the initial will was read felt surreal. Everyone was gathered in the stuffy lawyer's office, the air thick with unspoken tension. My parents sat beside me, their faces etched with a mixture of sadness and something else I couldn't quite decipher at the time. Olivia was across the room, fidgeting with her designer handbag, looking bored. The lawyer, a stern-looking man with a perpetual frown, droned on about legal jargon and probate, words that swirled around me like a confusing fog. And then, the hammer dropped. Olivia Thompson, $100,000. Lily Thompson, nothing. The silence that followed was deafening. I glanced at my parents, hoping for an explanation, a sign that this was all a mistake. But their eyes were averted, their expressions carefully neutral. It was real. Later, in the car, my mom finally spoke. It's just, Olivia needs it more, Lily. She has aspirations. And, well, you're so practical, so responsible. You'll be fine. Practical? Responsible? Was that it? Was I being penalized for being the level-headed one, the one who didn't rack up credit card debt or chase fleeting dreams? My dad chimed in, his voice gruff. Your sister has always been delicate. This will give her a good start. A good start? What about my start? I had dreams too, albeit less extravagant ones. I wanted to travel, maybe buy a small apartment, invest in my future. But apparently, my dreams weren't as important as Olivia's. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene in my head. The unfairness of it all gnawed at me. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the message it sent. I was less valued, less deserving. And that hurt more than I could express. The will, in its cold, legal language, had managed to shatter a piece of my heart. For weeks after the will reading, I struggled to make sense of it all. I tried to talk to my parents, to understand their reasoning, but our conversations always ended in frustration. They would repeat the same tired excuses about Olivia's needs and my resilience, as if those were valid reasons to disregard me completely. I even attempted to talk to Olivia, hoping she might offer some insight, some explanation. But she just shrugged, a smug look on her face. It's not my fault Grandpa liked me better, she said, twirling a strand of her perfectly styled hair. Maybe if you were more fun, he would have left you something too. Her words stung, but they also revealed a truth I'd been trying to ignore. Olivia had always been the favored child. She was beautiful, charming, and knew exactly how to manipulate people to get what she wanted. And my parents? They were putty in her hands. The unfairness of it all consumed me. I found myself withdrawing from my family, avoiding their calls and invitations. It wasn't out of spite, but self-preservation. Being around them, seeing the blatant favoritism, only amplified the pain and resentment I felt. I confided in my best friend, Sarah, who listened patiently as I poured out my heart. It's not about the money, Lily, she said, it's about respect. Your grandpa clearly valued you, and your parents are completely disregarding that. Sarah's words resonated with me. It wasn't just about the money. It was about feeling seen, feeling valued, feeling like I mattered. And right now, I felt invisible, like a ghost in my own family. I knew I couldn't continue down this path, letting resentment fester and poison my relationships. I needed to find a way to heal, to forgive, and to move forward, even if it meant accepting the painful truth about my family dynamics. Olivia was everything I wasn't. Where I was quiet and bookish, she was outgoing and glamorous. She always had the latest clothes, the perfect makeup, and a string of admirers hanging on her every word. While I spent my weekends curled up with a good book, she was out partying, jet-setting to exotic locations, and living a life that seemed impossibly exciting. But beneath the surface, there was a darkness to Olivia, a manipulative streak that she often used to get her way. She had a knack for playing the victim, for turning any situation to her advantage. And my parents, blinded by their affection for her, rarely saw through her act. I remember one incident in high school when Olivia accused me of stealing her favorite necklace. I was innocent, of course, but she was so convincing, so distraught, that my parents immediately believed her. I was grounded for a week, forced to apologize for something I didn't do, while Olivia smugly enjoyed her victory. That was just one example of her behavior, a pattern that continued throughout our lives. She always needed to be the center of attention, the one everyone admired and envied. And she wasn't afraid to step on anyone, even her own sister, to achieve her goals. Looking back, I realized that the inheritance was just the latest manifestation of this dynamic. Olivia felt entitled to it, convinced that she deserved it more than I did. And my parents, as always, were willing to enable her. I started to see her actions in a new light. It wasn't just about being spoiled, it was about a deep-seated insecurity, a need for validation that she desperately sought from others. But even understanding her motivations didn't make it any easier to accept her behavior. She was still hurting me, and I couldn't allow that to continue. The arrival of Grandpa Joe's lawyer was about to change everything, though. I just didn't know it yet. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door to find a man in a dark suit standing on my porch, holding a briefcase. He introduced himself as Mr. Harrison, Grandpa Joe's lawyer. My heart skipped a beat. What could he possibly want? Had there been some mistake with the initial will? Ms. Thompson, he said, his voice formal and professional, I need to speak with you regarding your grandfather's estate. I have reason to believe there is another will. Another will? I was stunned. What do you mean? The will was already read. My sister received her inheritance. Mr. Harrison sighed. Yes, but that may not be the final word. I recently discovered a more recent version of your grandfather's will, one that significantly alters the distribution of his assets. He stepped inside, and I led him to the living room, my mind racing. What could this new will possibly say? And why hadn't we heard about it before? Mr. Harrison opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick document. He cleared his throat and began to read. As he spoke, my jaw dropped. This new will stated that I, Lily Thompson, was to inherit the entirety of Grandpa Joe's estate, estimated to be around $5 million. $5 million. It was an unbelievable amount of money, a life-changing sum that I couldn't even begin to comprehend. I stared at Mr. Harrison, speechless, my mind struggling to process the enormity of what he was saying. But the surprises didn't end there. Mr. Harrison went on to explain that he had concerns about the validity of some of Grandpa Joe's recent financial transactions, hinting at the possibility of foul play. He mentioned something about forged signatures and unauthorized withdrawals, sending a chill down my spine. The ground beneath my feet felt unsteady. Everything I thought I knew about my family, about my grandpa, was suddenly being called into question. This was no longer just an inheritance drama, it was becoming a full-blown mystery. According to Mr. Harrison, Grandpa Joe had updated his will just months before his passing. The document stated that he was leaving his entire estate to me because he believed I possessed the qualities necessary to manage it responsibly. He cited my level-headedness, my strong work ethic, and my commitment to helping others. He wrote about how he had watched me grow into a kind, compassionate, and intelligent woman, and how he trusted me to use his wealth to make a positive impact on the world. He even mentioned my love for books and my passion for preserving knowledge, stating that he hoped I would use some of the money to support the library where I worked. Reading those words, hearing Grandpa Joe's voice come through so clearly in the legal jargon, brought tears to my eyes. It was like he was speaking to me from beyond the grave, reaffirming his belief in me, his love for me. It was the validation I had been craving, the reassurance that I mattered, that I was worthy. The will also included a clause explaining why Olivia was excluded. Grandpa Joe wrote that he loved her, but he was concerned about her spending habits and her tendency to be easily influenced by others. He feared that giving her a large sum of money would only enable her destructive behavior and ultimately lead to her unhappiness. He hoped that by leaving everything to me, I would be able to help Olivia in a more meaningful way, perhaps by guiding her towards a more fulfilling and responsible life. It was a heavy burden to bear, but also a tremendous honor. Grandpa Joe was entrusting me with his legacy, with the responsibility of caring for my sister and using his wealth for good. But the mention of forged signatures still lingered in my mind. If Olivia was somehow involved in manipulating Grandpa Joe's finances, then the stakes were even higher than I imagined. This was no longer just about money, it was about justice, about protecting Grandpa Joe's memory, and about uncovering the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Mr. Harrison explained that he had been investigating some discrepancies in Grandpa Joe's accounts for several weeks, ever since he noticed a series of unusual withdrawals. He had hired a forensic accountant to examine the records, and the evidence pointed to one disturbing conclusion: someone had been forging Grandpa Joe's signature to access his funds. The accountant had identified several checks and documents with signatures that didn't match Grandpa Joe's known signature. The forgeries were skillful, but subtle inconsistencies betrayed their fraudulent nature. Mr. Harrison suspected that someone close to Grandpa Joe, someone who had access to his personal information and signature samples, was responsible. He had shared his findings with the police, who had launched their own investigation. They had requested copies of Grandpa Joe's financial records and were in the process of interviewing potential suspects. Mr. Harrison cautioned me not to discuss the investigation with anyone, including my family, as it could compromise their efforts. But the evidence was mounting, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Olivia was somehow involved. Her lavish lifestyle, her constant need for money, her manipulative tendencies, it all pointed in her direction. I knew I had to be careful, but I also couldn't stand by and watch while someone potentially tarnished Grandpa Joe's legacy and stole from his estate. I decided to do some investigating of my own, discreetly, of course. I started by reviewing Grandpa Joe's bank statements, looking for any patterns or anomalies that might shed light on the situation. I also began to observe Olivia more closely, paying attention to her spending habits and her interactions with others. I knew it was a risky move, but I felt compelled to uncover the truth, for Grandpa Joe's sake. The thought of Olivia betraying him in such a way made my blood boil. The time for quiet acceptance was over, it was time to fight back. My amateur sleuthing eventually paid off. While organizing some old family photos at my parents' house, a convenient excuse to snoop, I stumbled upon a box of Olivia's old school projects. Among them was a handwriting practice sheet, filled with meticulously copied signatures. And there it was, clear as day, Grandpa Joe's signature, practiced over and over again. The blood drained from my face. This was it, the smoking gun. I carefully photographed the practice sheet, making sure to capture every detail. I knew I had to confront Olivia, but I also knew I had to be prepared. She wouldn't go down without a fight. I called her and asked her to meet me at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown. I didn't tell her why, just that it was important. When she arrived, she was her usual self, impeccably dressed and radiating an air of confidence. "So, what's so important?" she asked, sipping her latte. I took a deep breath and pulled out my phone, displaying the photograph of the handwriting practice sheet. Her eyes widened, and the color drained from her face. "What is this?" she stammered, her voice trembling. "Don't play dumb, Olivia," I said, my voice firm. "This is your handwriting practice sheet, with Grandpa Joe's signature copied over and over again. You've been forging his signature, haven't you?" She denied it at first, of course, but her lies were weak and unconvincing. I pressed her harder, presenting the evidence, pointing out the inconsistencies in her story. Finally, she broke down, tears streaming down her face. "Okay, fine, I did it," she sobbed. "But it was for a good reason. I needed the money. I have bills to pay, a lifestyle to maintain." Her confession was shocking, but not entirely surprising. I had suspected her all along, but hearing her admit it out loud was still a punch to the gut. The betrayal cut deep. Not just because she had stolen from Grandpa Joe, but because she had betrayed our family, our bond as sisters. The hardest part was telling my parents. I knew they would be devastated, not just by Olivia's actions, but by the realization that they had enabled her behavior for so long. I gathered them at their house, presenting the evidence, explaining the situation as calmly as I could. At first, they refused to believe it. Olivia would never do something like that, my mom insisted, her voice trembling. She's just misguided. But as I laid out the facts, as they saw the handwriting practice sheet with their own eyes, their denial crumbled. My dad sank into a chair, his face ashen. My mom began to cry. How could she, my dad whispered, his voice filled with anguish. How could she betray her grandfather like that? The guilt was palpable. They knew they had played a role in shaping Olivia's character, in fostering her sense of entitlement. They had always given her everything she wanted, shielding her from the consequences of her actions. And now, their indulgence had led to this, a full-blown family crisis, a betrayal that threatened to tear us apart. We should have seen it, my mom sobbed. We should have done something. We were so blind. I tried to comfort them, but I was hurting too. I felt betrayed by Olivia, but also by my parents, who had consistently chosen her over me. It was a complicated mix of emotions, anger, sadness, resentment, and a desperate desire for reconciliation. The police were now involved, and Olivia faced potential legal consequences for her actions. My parents were torn between protecting their daughter and doing what was right. They knew she had to be held accountable, but they couldn't bear the thought of her going to jail. The fallout was immense. Our family dynamic was shattered, replaced by a fragile web of guilt, resentment, and uncertainty. I knew it would take time, perhaps years, to heal the wounds that Olivia had inflicted. But I also knew that we had to try, for Grandpa Joe's sake, for our own sake. We were a family, and we had to find a way to move forward, even in the face of such profound betrayal. Olivia's world began to crumble. The police investigation intensified, and she was formally charged with multiple counts of forgery and fraud. The media got wind of the story, and her name was splashed across the local news, accompanied by unflattering photos. Her social circle evaporated. Her friends, the ones who had once flocked to her side, now avoided her like the plague. Her reputation, once so carefully cultivated, was in tatters. She lost her job, her apartment, and her sense of self-worth. My parents hired a lawyer for her, determined to provide her with the best possible defense. But even the best lawyer couldn't erase the evidence, couldn't undo the damage she had caused. Olivia pleaded guilty to some of the charges, hoping to receive a lighter sentence. The judge, however, was not lenient. He sentenced her to community service and ordered her to pay restitution to Grandpa Joe's estate. It wasn't jail time, but it was a significant consequence, a public shaming that would forever mark her record. Beyond the legal ramifications, the damage to our family was irreparable. The trust was gone, replaced by a deep-seated resentment that threatened to consume us all. My parents struggled to reconcile their love for Olivia with their disappointment in her actions. They visited her regularly, offering support and encouragement, but the conversations were strained, filled with unspoken accusations and regrets. Olivia, for her part, seemed to finally understand the gravity of her actions. She expressed remorse for hurting Grandpa Joe, for betraying our family. She apologized to me, her voice filled with genuine regret. But even her apology couldn't erase the past, couldn't undo the pain she had caused. She was now forced to face the consequences of her choices, to rebuild her life from the ground up. It was a long and arduous process, one that would test her resilience and her character. And while I couldn't condone her actions, I couldn't help but feel a flicker of sympathy for her. She was, after all, still my sister. And despite everything, I still loved her. Or at least, I wanted to. With Olivia's legal troubles underway, the reality of my inheritance began to sink in. $5 million. It was a staggering amount of money, far more than I had ever dreamed of possessing. The weight of that responsibility settled heavily on my shoulders. I grappled with a profound moral dilemma. How could I, a simple librarian, possibly manage such a vast fortune? What would Grandpa Joe want me to do with it? How could I ensure that it was used for good, that it didn't corrupt me or those around me? I spent countless hours poring over financial advice books, consulting with Mr. Harrison, and seeking guidance from trusted friends. I knew I needed to be smart, responsible, and thoughtful in my decisions. This wasn't just about me, it was about honoring Grandpa Joe's legacy, about fulfilling his wishes. I considered various options: investing, donating to charity, starting my own foundation. I even thought about giving some of the money to Olivia, to help her get back on her feet. But I knew that would be a mistake. She wasn't ready for that kind of responsibility, not yet. I realized that the first step was to take care of myself, to secure my own financial future. I paid off my student loans, bought a small apartment, and invested a portion of the money wisely. It felt good to have that security, to know that I could provide for myself without relying on anyone else. But I also knew that I couldn't hoard the money, that it was meant to be shared, to be used to make a difference in the world. I decided to focus on the causes that were closest to my heart: literacy, education, and community development. I started volunteering at local schools, tutoring children who were struggling to read. I donated to organizations that provided scholarships to underprivileged students. And I began to explore the possibility of starting my own literacy program, one that would reach even more people in need. The inheritance was a gift, but it was also a challenge, a test of my character and my values. I knew that Grandpa Joe was watching me, guiding me, and trusting me to make the right decisions. And I was determined to live up to his expectations, to use his wealth to create a better world, one book, one student, one community at a time. Rebuilding my relationship with my parents was a slow and delicate process. The guilt and shame they felt over Olivia's actions, combined with their past favoritism, created a significant barrier between us. I started by initiating small gestures, calling them more often, visiting them for dinner, offering to help with chores around the house. I tried to be patient, understanding that they were hurting too, that they needed time to process everything that had happened. Slowly, they began to open up, to express their regrets, to acknowledge their mistakes. They admitted that they had been too focused on Olivia's needs, neglecting my own. They apologized for making me feel undervalued, for not seeing my worth. Their words were healing, but the wounds ran deep. It would take more than just apologies to repair the damage that had been done. We needed to rebuild trust, to create a new dynamic based on honesty and respect. My relationship with Olivia was even more complicated. She was still living at home, completing her community service and trying to find a new job. The tension between us was palpable. I tried to be supportive, to offer her encouragement, but it was difficult. I couldn't forget what she had done, the betrayal she had inflicted. But I also couldn't abandon her. She was my sister, and I knew she needed my help, even if she didn't deserve it. I started by setting boundaries, making it clear that I wouldn't tolerate any more lies or manipulation. I also encouraged her to seek therapy, to address the underlying issues that had led to her destructive behavior. Slowly, she began to change. She became more humble, more accountable, more willing to take responsibility for her actions. She started volunteering at the local library, assisting with children's programs. She even expressed an interest in pursuing a career in social work, helping others who were struggling with similar challenges. It was a long and arduous journey, but I saw glimmers of hope, signs that Olivia was finally on the right path. And as she changed, so did our relationship. We began to reconnect, to rediscover the bond that had once united us. It wasn't the same as before, but it was something, a foundation upon which we could build a new future, together. As I delved deeper into managing the estate, I discovered even more about Grandpa Joe's values and his vision for the future. Mr. Harrison shared stories about his philanthropic endeavors, his quiet acts of kindness, his unwavering commitment to helping those in need. I learned that he had been a secret benefactor to numerous local charities, providing anonymous donations to support their missions. He had also established a scholarship fund for underprivileged students, helping them to pursue their dreams of higher education. He believed in the power of education, in the importance of giving back to the community, in the responsibility of using wealth for good. He had lived his life according to these principles, and he had hoped that I would continue his legacy. I found a box of his old journals, filled with handwritten notes and reflections on life, business, and philanthropy. His words were insightful, inspiring, and deeply personal. He wrote about the importance of integrity, the value of hard work, and the significance of making a positive impact on the world. He also wrote about his love for me, his pride in my accomplishments, and his belief in my potential. He said that he had always seen something special in me, a spark of kindness, a thirst for knowledge, a desire to make a difference. He entrusted me with his wealth because he knew that I would use it wisely, that I would honor his values, that I would carry on his legacy of giving back. He believed that I had the heart and the mind to make a positive impact on the world, and he wanted to give me the resources to do so. Reading his words, learning about his values, deepened my sense of responsibility. I knew that I couldn't let him down. I had to live up to his expectations, to use his wealth to create a better world, just as he had hoped. I decided to establish a foundation in his name, one that would focus on supporting literacy programs, providing educational opportunities for underprivileged students, and promoting community development initiatives. It would be a lasting tribute to his life, his values, and his legacy of giving back. And it would be my way of honoring his memory, of fulfilling his wishes, of making a positive impact on the world, one book, one student, one community at a time. The Grandpa Joe Thompson Foundation became my passion, my purpose, my way of honoring his memory. I assembled a board of directors comprised of trusted friends, community leaders, and experts in the fields of literacy and education. We developed a strategic plan, focusing on initiatives that would have the greatest impact on the lives of those in need. We launched a reading program for underprivileged children, providing them with access to books, tutoring, and mentorship. We established a scholarship fund for students pursuing degrees in education, helping to train the next generation of teachers. And we partnered with local organizations to support community development projects, creating opportunities for economic growth and social empowerment. I poured my heart and soul into the foundation, working tirelessly to ensure that it was a success. I visited schools, attended community events, and met with countless individuals whose lives had been touched by our programs. It was incredibly rewarding to see the positive impact that the foundation was having, to witness the transformation in the lives of those we were helping. Children who had once struggled to read were now devouring books with enthusiasm. Students who had never dreamed of going to college were now pursuing their degrees with confidence. Communities that had been plagued by poverty and despair were now thriving with hope and opportunity. Grandpa Joe's legacy was living on, not just in the name of the foundation, but in the lives of those we were serving. And I knew that he would be proud of what we had accomplished, of the difference we were making in the world. I also made sure to set aside a portion of the foundation's funds to support Olivia, once she had demonstrated a genuine commitment to changing her life. I offered her a job at the foundation, overseeing our volunteer programs. It was a chance for her to give back to the community, to use her skills and talents for good. And to my surprise, she embraced the opportunity with enthusiasm. She thrived in her new role, becoming a valuable asset to the foundation. It was a sign that she had truly turned a corner, that she was finally on the path to redemption. Years have passed since Grandpa Joe's lawyer first arrived at my door, forever changing the course of my life. The inheritance drama, the family betrayal, the legal battles, it all feels like a distant memory now, a chapter in my life that has finally come to a close. Olivia is thriving at the foundation, overseeing our volunteer programs with passion and dedication. She has found her purpose in helping others, in giving back to the community. She is a different person now, more humble, more compassionate, more grateful for the second chance she has been given. My relationship with my parents has also healed. They have learned from their mistakes, and they are now more supportive, more understanding, more appreciative of who I am. We have rebuilt our trust, and we have created a new dynamic based on honesty and respect. As for me, I have found peace and purpose in honoring Grandpa Joe's legacy. The foundation has become my life's work, my way of making a positive impact on the world. I am grateful for the opportunity to use his wealth to create a better future for others, to empower individuals, to transform communities. I still work as a librarian, part-time, because I love books, I love knowledge, and I love connecting people with information. But my primary focus is on the foundation, on expanding our programs, on reaching more people in need. I have learned so much from this experience, about family, about forgiveness, about responsibility, about the power of giving back. I have learned that money doesn't buy happiness, but it can be used to create opportunities, to empower individuals, to transform communities. And most importantly, I have learned that Grandpa Joe was right about me all along. He saw something special in me, a potential that I didn't even know I possessed. He entrusted me with his wealth because he believed that I would use it wisely, that I would honor his values, that I would carry on his legacy of giving back. And I have done my best to live up to his expectations, to make him proud. I know that he is watching me, guiding me, and smiling down on me from above. And that gives me the strength and the courage to continue on this path, to keep fighting for a better world, one book, one student, one community at a time. The future is bright, and I am excited to see what it holds. One of the most profound lessons from Lily's story is the importance of integrity, responsibility, and the wise use of resources. Grandpa Joe's wealth and legacy could have been a curse, fueling greed and division within the family. Instead, Lily chose to use it as a blessing, not just for herself, but for the community. Her journey teaches us that true wealth is not just about money, but about the positive impact we can have on others' lives. It highlights the value of staying true to one's principles, even in the face of adversity, and the importance of forgiveness and second chances in healing and rebuilding relationships. As Lily looks back on the tumultuous journey that has brought her to where she is today, standing at the helm of the Grandpa Joe Thompson Foundation, she can't help but wonder, what legacy will you leave behind, and how will you choose to use the resources and opportunities that come your way to make a lasting, positive impact on the world?